Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Leveraging Shuteye for Resilience. On behalf of the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you all. My name is David Saab. I'm the Business Alliance Manager and Mental Wellbeing Champion for the Chamber. And it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our chair, Amantha King, who is the founder of Amantha King Coaching, certified NLP coach, strengths development consultant, keynote speaker, mental health first aider, and menopause coach and facilitator. Without further ado, over to Amantha.
Thank you, David. Thank you. What a pleasure to be back here with the Chamber. I'm just one of a huge group of people known as the Mental Health Steering Group. It gives me great pleasure to be the chair, the co-chair actually, for today's session. I'm going to be ably joined by my colleagues LLoyd, a chartered psychologist and psychotherapist. There's Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Hi. And we're also going to be joined by our esteemed colleague, Andrew Thurman-Pickett from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Andrew's an Audit Senior Manager there, and he's going to be watching the chat. So probably now is a good time to say, please feel free to use the chat function to connect with one another, to talk to one another, to put questions there, because Andrew's going to be monitoring the questions from the chat. So just to set the tone for today, it's going to be fast paced, and that's how we do things here. So it's going to be 40 minutes of time with our keynote speaker, Dr. Jill McGarry, and we're going to be taking questions at the end for 20 minutes. What I will say up front is, if we don't have time to get to all the questions, one thing we're really passionate about is getting back to people. So Jill will actually get back to people. So we've no time to lose. So please enjoy this webinar. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some polls as well. So we'll notify you when we're going to do that. So let's talk about this topic of sleep, shall we? Because sleep can feel like an absolute indulgence at times. We often think that it's something that gets prioritized pretty much last when we can fit it in, but it really is important on our well-being list. So let's look at some figures, shall we? Because this is what usually informs the conversation. The Health and Safety Executive has said that 200,000 working days are lost due to insufficient sleep every single year, and that costs the UK economy on average £30 billion, which is just phenomenal. And that can be due to mental health reasons, accidents, sickness. So if we put that into the UK population, what that means is that 1 in 7 people, about 14% of the population, actually has less than 5 hours sleep a night. And actually 37 million people, which is huge, has about 7 to 9 hours sleep, less than 7 to 9 hours sleep, which is considered to be optimal. So how does this link to mental health? Well, we know that 34% of all mental health problems are actually linked to sleep. And research shows that chronic insomnia can make people more likely to develop a mood disorder, depression, or anxiety. So are we fully aware just how important sleep is? I know in my house, it's the first thing everyone asks each other when we get up. Apparently you're not meant to do that in the first hour. You're meant to ask, after the first hour. But let's get into it. And to help us navigate this complex landscape is our brilliant keynote speaker, Dr. Jill McGarry. So let me introduce Dr. Jill McGarry to you a little bit. She's a clinical psychologist supporting people with mental health issues. She also runs a part-time clinic for improving sleep and works part-time at Manchester's NHS Sleep Service. Her details can be found on the invite. She's all over LinkedIn as well. And you can read more about her, where she creates strategies for sleep awareness in businesses. But what I will say up front, Jill has very, very kindly offered to give every single person attending this call a free 15-minute consultation for anything personally or corporately related. So that's a huge, generous offer right up front. So let me introduce Dr. Jill McGarry. Hi, Jill. If you'd like to unmute yourself, that would be great. You're still on mute, Jill. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi,
yeah,
Jill.
Thanks for that great introduction, Amantha. It's really good to meet everybody. Sleep is such a big issue. I love the details you've given. Only just in The Guardian in May, were they talking about the fact that it's now it's costing the UK £40 billion. And that one of the pieces of research has shown that when people talk about why aren't they living healthy lives, they're saying they're too tired. So, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. So it's great. The more people I can get to. So definitely that free chat of 15 minutes is out there to support people.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's so generous of you. And I know you'll be inundated, absolutely inundated. So let's have a bit of audience participation, shall we? Let's take a look at our first poll. So I'm very ably assisted by Kirsty Avis today. And I'd also like to say a special mention to Sally Hansen as well, who's helped enormously with this. So here is our first poll. What we'd like you to do is to read through all of the options. The question is, what are the biggest short-term effects of poor sleep for you? Now, it's a single choice, so go with the option that most reflects how you're feeling. You don't have to have every element in that option, but we've got the 4 options. So fatigue, difficulty managing emotions, relationships affected. We've got difficulty concentrating, difficulty remembering, impaired decision making. Thirdly, we've got overeating, you know, being drawn to those sugary foods, or falling asleep inappropriately, or slower to process tasks. And lastly, lower alertness, increased accidents, decreased ability to cope with trauma. So if you would like to cast your vote, that would be absolutely brilliant. We'll give you another sort of 10 seconds, because the issue of sleep is one that do we become aware of it more when we realize we don't have it? Are we that aware? You know, even quite recently with the hot weather, how many of us have had you know, a dysfunction when it comes to our sleep, not getting quite as much sleep as we would like? So so Kirsty, are we ready to see the results of the poll? Wow, so interesting. I know you'll be keen to see this as well, Jill. So what's coming out the most? 39% is fatigue, difficulty managing emotions, and relationships being affected. Sorry, that's not actually the top one. The top one is the second one, where it's difficulty concentrating, difficulty remembering, impaired decision making. Slight irony there. So what we know is that all the categories on some level are affecting people. So this probably shows us why this is something that we should be considering in the context of mental health, well-being, and definitely in the workplace. Would you agree, Jill?
Completely, yeah. I think it, you know, it just shows you that if you add those first 2 up together, that's 60%. And how many different jobs that we do throughout the day involve all of those things. So yeah, it's going to have a big impact. It might be just a short-term impact. It might be a day when you're less, you know, able to function at your optimum. But if it goes on for longer, it can be really tough. It can have real huge impacts on those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we just don't see it like that. And we can move between those groups, I would imagine, as well.
And I bet you some people on this would love to tick every single one of them. It's not going to be so nice and neat and orderly. Lots of people go, it's everything, it's every single one of them, to different degrees.
And definitely in different life stages as well, isn't it? I mean, my work with menopause, I know that actually that sleep becomes much more pronounced for people, or sleep issues rather. So I'd like to hand over to our co-chair, Lisa, who's going to take you through the next question.
Yeah, you know what? I think that poll is really interesting to lead into this next question, because it just shows how relevant poor sleep is for us, or sleep. And the question I wanted to ask you, Jill, which is one that I come across a huge amount when I'm working with companies, isn't it just companies with night shift workers that need sleep on their agenda? And I think the poll responses have already started moving in a particular direction for your answer, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, it is a really important question. I'm so glad you've asked it. And it is not necessarily all about sleep, about night shift workers. It's about us all. Yeah, the poll's done a fab job of showing that completely. There are many examples of other issues that people have when they're in work. I think Amantha has already said about menopause, so about the aging process. As we get older, we sleep less, what we would call monosyllabically. So we don't get one condensed amount of sleep. So you often see people having a nap in the afternoon. And I know it's not the UK culture to do that, but hey, it is okay and it is natural. I think we've forgotten in the UK about being aware of our bodies. So I really like the poll for making people stop and think about what is happening to them personally. But there are loads and loads of different areas that can be affected. Often people talk about, oh my gosh, I travel loads, whether they be a sales rep or an engineer, and that impacting because you're not sleeping in your own bed, you haven't got your nice comfy pillow, you have got strange noises. People often say they want to sleep further away from the lift, and that's not always possible in the hotel you've booked into. And then others talk about, but I have to fly to other zones. So there's a load of jet lag that might be there as well that's causing them to sleep, having sleep problems. It could be that you're a driver and you're having to actually sleep in your van with the goods in the back, and that can be really tough, and you don't know if you're going to have somebody come and take stuff out of your van. So there's a whole host of just very, very specific, realistic things for some workers, but overall other things can have an effect, just working overtime and feeling really stressed. So that can be from the CEO, the person right at the top, having to manage all the finances, all the strategies, all the teams, down to the cleaner, you know, who might have financial problems, health problems, relationship problems. You know, we have all those things, all of us, and no one of us can say we're excluded from that. And stress definitely does add into problems with sleep, because our minds are very clever. It likes to keep working at different problems. But not only is our mind working, our body is really active. So if we've got any physical health problems, pain can really affect whether we can sleep, whether we can get a comfortable position, whether the pain is actually just keeping us awake. And then on top of that, if you're looking after somebody who's got physical pain, or whether you're just looking after somebody because you're a caregiver, maybe it be that you're a parent, or you're looking after a sibling or a loved one, then that can impact on your ability to sleep, because you might be getting up in the night to look after them. You might be spending more time taking care of them that you've forgotten that actually you need to have your sleep as well. And I think one of the most interesting things is pregnant women, as well as menopausal women, talk about the fact that they struggle with sleep. But as Amantha says quite often on her work, it's not just about women. It's not just about pregnant women, but actually it has an impact on their partner. And if you think about it, in that pre-pregnancy phase, actually, if you're not getting enough sleep and you're sleep deprived, you actually affect your reproductive ability. So actually, men need to be thinking about, if they want to have children, are they affecting what's going to happen to their family life in the future if they don't get enough sleep?
And you've already touched on a little bit about stress, but also, and Amantha was putting in the introduction about, we'll talk about in the introduction about mental health. And for me, I see a huge there's a huge correlation, isn't there, between sleep problems and people experiencing some challenges to their mental health, whatever that might be. And we know with what's happening in the world right now, with a cost of living crisis and everything else happening, people are more stressed, and there are lots of people who are struggling with their mental health, and it really impacts on their sleep.
Yeah, we have got research that's happened in the UK and America and in Europe that's now being developed and carried out in developing countries, that shows actually sleep deprivation happens 6 months before a mental health incident, situation happens. And actually, if we can help people that are depressed to spot when their sleep deprivation is beginning to happen, we can stop the next onset of an episode. So it is, the two are really, really closely linked. But we only need to think about, when I haven't had enough sleep, I get irritable, I get quite, you know, your brain starts to do all the sad thinking, you know, it clings onto those things that aren't useful. So I think we all instinctively know it's the case, but it's really great now that we're getting some of the research behind it.
Maybe that's a good place to actually move on to Amantha's next question then, in terms of that kind of the conversation we need to have around noticing our sleep. You're on mute, Amantha. You think we'd have nailed this by now.
I know, it's so funny. You'd have thought after nearly 3 years of doing Zoom. Anyway, yeah, no, thank you. So interesting, Jill. And we've got lots of comments coming in the chat. Just to say to people, if you have got a question directly, please do put it in the Q&A, because it'd be so valuable. Some of the little threads that I'm picking up on that I could probably just add in here a little bit are that, you know, people are wondering what the signs are. So, you know, Jill, would you be able to give us some insight on what are the signs of that someone is struggling with sleep deprivation? And can I be cheeky and ask you a second part to that, which is what are the challenges they might face in that? So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, lots of people think about the visual signs of somebody struggling with their sleep. You know, bags under their eyes is the first thing that everybody says, or somebody yawning a lot. But actually, there's lots of behavioural things that people do. And the most obvious one is for people that are in the work environment and managers that are thinking about picking it up, or maybe seeing it in yourself and being more self-aware, is that you become to be sleepy in meetings. So you might still be really interested in what's happening in that meeting, but you're really finding it hard to concentrate because you aren't able to move around and give yourself some energy by movement. So if somebody looks like they're getting sleepy in a meeting, that's a real strong indication that actually just for that day, they might be having a tough time. And it might just be nice to be kind, but it might be also an indication that something else is going on that's at a deeper level. It might be the fact that they're finding it hard to get to work. And if this constantly happens, they're missing the bus because they can't get out of bed and they can't get into work, or they've fallen asleep on the train. Those are good indications that, yeah, somebody might be going through a time when they're getting sleep deprived, that sleep is really having an impact. It might mean that for some people that are larks rather than owls, that they may be like, oh, I can't do any more time at work. I've been here long enough. I'm getting really tired now. And they may start finishing work early, or they may be like talking about, I need to get out of the office as quick as possible, which is quite the opposite to the other bit I was saying about people not getting into work. That's more for the people that we talk about as owls, those people that like to stay up at night. Sickness can increase, and absences as well. Some of the little kind of extra cues are if people are suddenly hitting the sugary items, hitting the cakes and the sweets, just to give them that pick-me-up as the day goes along, because they're struggling with staying alert throughout the day. Coffee is another indication. So if they suddenly start drinking lots and lots of coffee in the morning, that could be an indication. Poor concentration is a massive one. So you might find somebody not being able to stay on task as long as they want to, that they might be flitting from activity to activity. But one of the biggest and most important reasons why we're beginning to have legislation, the UK is catching up on Europe, because there's lots of guidance in Europe, they're a lot further ahead around sleep, is the fact that mistakes happen. So we've had some major incidents happen in work because of sleep deprivation. It's not just about concentration, it's that next level where injuries happen. We've had doctors die. So anaesthetists now have a policy around sleep and making sure anaesthetists get an opportunity to have a nap. It could be that communication is becoming more difficult, which can therefore affect teamwork. Because if you think about it, if you're not quite as alert, you're not noticing what other people around you are doing, so you don't pick up on the tiny cues that makes teamwork and work more effectively. You might forget things, and therefore the team feel affected by that, and your communication gets affected by that as well. And sometimes people take bigger risks. That can be the reason why those mistakes happen. But you just come a bit more risky, a bit more impulsive, which can't be great either for the team. And overall, what a manager will be interested in is it can affect productivity and performance. So if you're just looking at some number crunching and all of a sudden there's a big dip, then that might be a time just for you to say to them, are you struggling with sleep? Because to ask somebody about their sleep is a real nice niche corner. Because if you ask about somebody about their sleep, most people want to talk about it. You said it at the beginning, Amantha, didn't you? About it's the first thing people want to ask in the morning. So if it's an opener to ask about their physical health, but it's definitely a great opener to ask about somebody's mental health. People don't mind talking about sleep. And if they start talking about it and you start talking about the symptoms of it, then you can actually begin to start asking about their mental health as well. So it's a really great one. We also asked about what are the challenges, and there are quite a few. I'm just trying to think about how much time I've got to go through this.
No, you're good. You're great. You're great. But can I just come in just on that part, that little A part there, which is, you're so right. And it is those subtleties, isn't it? You know, because actually when we're tired, we're probably, you know, our emotional bandwidth is probably a little more reduced, I would say, definitely. And so that is really important, isn't it? If we're overseeing other people, if we're looking after people, if we're part of a team. I probably haven't considered that quite as much, although I do feel that myself. Actually, we all know when we're a bit tired, don't we? We need to sort of take a break. So that's really helpful, Jill. So yes, that second part, because it all sounds like, well, okay, if we're aware of the problem, surely it's quite easy to resolve it. But what are the challenges in that?
I think there are 5 main challenges. The first one is culture. You know, the British culture really doesn't help. Europe is well and truly ahead of us. Even Asia is. I don't know if you saw the clip that Lisa kindly shared when she was promoting this, is that people sleep under their desks. They have actual beds made up so that they can have sleep. There was a BBC program about napping and how it helps the brain develop. So we've got a crazy thing that the UK has this phrase, you snooze, you lose. Actually, it's quite the opposite. And the other thing is the early bird catches the worm. Where do we get these crazy phrases from? Because it's not the case. For an owl, they'll be catching that worm when everybody else is asleep. So you really need to think about personalize it. What works for you? Don't take a nap if you don't need it. So I think age has gone one way, as has Europe, but they stay up later. We quite like going to bed earlier. So think about who you are and what would work for you. The next thing is that you need to trust it. These wearables that people wear in bed actually make you too hyper alert. And when you become hyper alert, you become stressed. And when you become stressed, you become over focused and you can't sleep. So take them off at night. Put them at the other side of the room, take your phone and put that at the other side of the room as well. So when your alarm goes off on your phone, you actually have to get out of bed. So one of those great tips is to just make sure you trust in your sleep, that it's what we all need to do. It's what we were born to do, is to sleep. It's as important as breathing and drinking and eating healthily and doing some exercise. But we also need to prioritize it. And that's really hard. And the other thing that's really hard is to break the habits. So sometimes the work I do is just like a fitness trainer. It's just helping people to use the sleep hygiene that's out there.
Jill, can I come in and just ask what can, this is no small question, what can someone do if they know or if they think they are struggling with sleep or insomnia? So what's that recovery process like? What does it involve?
So some people, well, actually all the time, is you'll go in the supermarket and you'll find fancy teas and you'll find fancy sprays. So they're not going to work. You know, they're just gimmicks that are out there. They've got a placebo effect to some degree. So just having nice stuff and thinking you're working on something is really, really useful. But actually, most people just assume it's an insomnia problem. So they go on sites looking at insomnia straight away. However, it's not the biggest problem. So I try and break things down nice and simply, because you can imagine I've been doing this for a long time and there's huge number of different sleep problems. So I try and make it really, really simple to say there are 4 types of problems. There's the big B and 3 tiny T's. So the big B is a breathing problem. So if you're finding it hard to breathe when you're asleep, or your partner says, God, you're gasping for breath, then you might be suffering from a thing called sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is the biggest problem, and it is the most solvable. There is kits that can be used in our sleep team. We give them out all the time. I'm there to support people that find it hard to use the equipment, but I'm going to go through a nice little acronym that helps you find out if you've got a sleep apnea problem or a loved one has. So when I do these talks, and lots of us clinical psychologists and specialists in sleep use this acronym all the time, because if we do nothing else in these talks, we help people to go to their GP and see somebody for sleep apnea. So that's the big B, so that's breathing. And the 3 tiny T's, the first T is too little sleep. So you're right, it could be insomnia, but it could be that you're just not prioritizing sleep. You're just not sleeping enough, and you just need some help to make sure you get more sleep. It could be, the next T could be too little. So it could be a very specific problem, and it is really important that you get some help when you have a problem of too little or too much. So for insomnia, you can go to your GP and you can get referred to an IAP team, a counselling team, to get a thing called cognitive behaviour therapy for insomnia. Do not do it on your own if you've got insomnia. I know there are loads of sites out there, but doing little bits of everything doesn't help. And then the other one is too much sleep. And again, you need to go to your GP. It could be narcolepsy, it could be a vitamin D deficiency, it could be an iron deficiency, it could be lots of things. And then the third T, things that go bump in the night. So that could be sleepwalking, sleep talking, restless leg, if you've heard of that, which is also linked to lack of iron. But I won't go into any detail about them. I want to really focus on that STOP BANG acronym that I said I was going to give you for people that might have sleep apnea. So STOP BANG has got 8 letters, and each letter is about a symptom, and you need 4 or 5 symptoms to go to your GP to get a referral to a sleep team for sleep apnea. So I'm just going to quickly go through it. It's at the end as well. In fact, I probably haven't got time to go through it, but just have a look at the link, the resource that I'll share later about that. Because what I want to actually say to you all right now is, no matter what your problem is, the first basic thing is you need to think about sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is like dental hygiene, it's like hand hygiene, but our brains are more complicated than the skin and the enamel and ivory in our teeth. So we need more advice around sleep hygiene than we do for the other two. However, just like the other two, if you get a filling that's needed, you don't stop brushing your teeth. If you get a stomach bug, you don't stop washing your hand. So if you have a sleep problem, it's important that you don't stop doing the everyday things that are really important. But what is sleep hygiene? And there's loads of misinformation out there. Some advice around sleep insomnia is given as part of sleep hygiene, confuses things completely. So again, I like to try and make it simple, and I like to give you 4 things again. So the 4 things you need to think about is just like us being cavemen and cave women, and think about our bodies are still ancient. We're doing what we did then. So if you think about going to sleep, one of the things they had was a routine. They always went to bed when the sun went down and when it came up. Well, we don't do that anymore. We've got electric light bulbs, but having a nice, healthy routine is the first one. The second one is heat. So you need to think about, is it cool at night? Is it warm in the morning? Because that's what happens when the sun rises and the sun sets. But the other thing that happens when the sun rises and the sun sets is that light changes. So we need it dark at night. But the most important thing is we need it light in the morning. Getting a thing called melatonin into our eyes is probably one of the most important things that we're not doing. Recently, I worked with a lady who we realized she was having real problems with sleep onset. And it's because she was wearing sunglasses all the time because she didn't want wrinkles. So she wasn't getting any melatonin into her eyes to help her get off to sleep. Took that away. It's simple. Some things I do really quickly. It only takes 2 sessions and it's sorted, bish, bash, bosh. Sometimes it takes a lot more education and working through what the issues are. So really, and then the 4th one is nutrition. Making sure that you have a good routine about when you eat, because our bodies like to be in a routine. Our body clocks are there all the time during the day. That's why we're most sluggish at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're at our most tired at 2 a.m. also. So it's really interesting. Our bodies, every single organ, even our bowel has a body clock. And when I do longer talks on this is so short, I'd explain that in a lot more detail and how important that is for everything.
Jill, you have given so much information. Is there? I know you've got more to say. Is there anything else you particularly want that you think be useful to get across now? Because what we're going to do is make sure, and Amantha's already said this, we're going to put resources. So you haven't got time to go through the stop bang now in detail, but we're going to make sure we're going to put all the resources into the chat a little bit later so people can go and look at that for themselves. And you have covered so much. Is there, before I move on to a poll, because I'm really keen to get some more audience participation, is there anything else that you think would be really useful just to share in terms of some of the kind of key strategies?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about on one of your linked things is about the yawn effect. So if people can work out when they yawn, their first natural yawn, not copying somebody else, or you might actually yawn now because we're talking about it, but your first natural yawn. So say it happens at 6 o'clock tonight, then every 90 minutes will be another dip in your energy levels, because yawning is giving an idea that your energy levels are dipping. So if you think about it, you want to go to bed or be in bed and about to fall asleep when your energy is at its lowest. So if you go 6 o'clock, there'll be another one at 9 o'clock and there'll be another one at midnight. Yeah, there'll be one in between as well. 90 minutes on average. If people begin to become self-aware, they might realize theirs is a bit longer. So if you had a yawn at 6, then you want to be in bed at 12, going to sleep, which actually then you need to think about, what's my nighttime routine? How long does it take me to get in bed? So you might actually be thinking about switching off the lights downstairs at 11:30. You might not be that person. You might be a lark, and you might be thinking, I want to catch the one before that. So you want to go forward 90 minutes to find the earlier slot. So I don't know if that's useful. I'm hoping that
that's really, really useful, because again, it's a really practical strategy that people can look out for. And I think that's what's really valuable about these webinars. And I know in the chat, some people are putting some questions in there. They struggle to switch off and that sort of thing. And actually, that's where people can get in touch with you directly afterwards and to make the most of that 15-minute consultation they can get to answer some of their questions. So I think it'd be really good to do now is to go to then our next poll. So if Kirsty could please bring that up for us, that'd be brilliant. So the question here is, what shouldn't companies do when it comes to sleep? And I love these options. So again, just choose one of them. So should you not ignore the issue of sleep and associated issues, be excluding when it comes to sleep as an issue, assume there's just insomnia type sleep problems, or all of the above? And we're just going to give you a few seconds. This is not only testing your own knowledge, but how we've been listening to what Jill's been saying so far. Okay. So 5 more seconds. There's so much you're packing into this, Jill. I'm really grateful for I know a lot about sleep through the work I do, but actually I'm scribbling frantically lots and lots of suggestions here. So thank you very much for that. Right. Kirsty, could we please bring up the results? They're a good audience, Jill. They've been listening well. Well done. So yeah, all of the above. Companies really do need to take action to do something about sleep. So I'm going to hand over now to Amantha, who's going to help think about the next question around what should companies be doing about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Lisa. Really, honestly, I was just like my head is filling up with all these things, because actually, isn't that the most important thing? Because actually, when we're lacking sleep, it's like, what do I go to help myself? So you've given lots of things there, and as Lisa said, these are all going to be in the resources at the end. So okay. So here we are as a business. Doesn't matter what size your business you are. You could be a small business, 2 people, up to a much larger organization. We know that most people aren't sleeping. Going back to those statistics, 37 million people, that's 71% of the population, aren't getting those 7 to 9 hours sleep, and life takes over. In fact, I thought about it, this is a universal experience, isn't it? If we polled the entire world and said who doesn't sleep well or has had an experience of not sleeping well, we'd all stick our hands up. So what can companies, what can they do to address sleep deprivation and insomnia? Because actually it's not just about insomnia, is it, Jill?
No.
You were really clear with me yesterday when we spoke, and you said actually it's the deprivation thing that's more important. So what can they do, and who should be involved?
Yeah, I think lots of companies think that, sleep doesn't happen at work, so it's not important. You know, that very first question about night shift workers says that as well. But actually, all companies have a legal duty to support and manage risk that leads to fatigue. That's laid out by the Health and Safety Executive. They are required to set up appropriate systems, but it's really hard, isn't it? Managers don't know what those systems are, because it's such a natural thing to sleep. It's hard to know what you can do as a manager to make it better, or as a company to have an overarching policy that would be useful. But there are some really practical help that's very similar to the last. Well, it's not similar, it's different to the last slide. But again, there is lots and lots of practical advice. The first thing is to think about flexible working. So we often think about flexible working for those that are carers, but actually flexible working, because each and every one of us have different circumstances, but we're also very personally different. So we need to think about personalizing things. And often I talk about the 5 pillars of sleep, and personalizing is one of them. So there are 3 P's and 2 others. So the 3 P's is personalize it, and prioritize it. I've talked a lot about prioritizing it already, but the 3rd P is protecting it. And actually, protecting is different to prioritizing, because other people protect you in your sleep. So that's exactly what businesses can do. They've got a massive role in that 3rd one, that protect, but also they have a role in valuing it. You know, if they have conversations in the office about sleep, then that is actually showing that they value it and they see it as important. If the CEO of the company, the top managers are role modeling for others and have got a policy and a strategy that that emphasizes sleep and its importance, and that it has an impact on their team. You know, if mistakes are happening, you know, I think about when I was younger and I used to work in the summer holidays in a big factory, just putting stuff on a conveyor belt. You know, accidents happen that can be huge. I saw people have some horrendous accidents, and it does cost companies money, but it costs managers heartache as well when they think about what could happen to people. So it is really, really important that they think about what can they do flexibly to help each person individually. And they can only do that by having conversations with people. So when it becomes appraisal time, ask them about their sleep, ask them about what's important about their sleep and how they get it. They can also think outside the appraisal and that once a year opportunity, and think about recognizing it in people and having those chats around coffee in the morning, or the first meeting, or a quiet moment when somebody's just finished in a meeting. Have those opportunities to just sink in with people and to ask that question, but just to bring it up as a general conversation. It's also important that people think about buildings. You and me, Amantha, were talking about this the other day, is that buildings can have a big influence, because people think, oh, I'll get lots of natural light by sitting near the window. So like my window here, loads of light coming through it, but that doesn't mean it's good for my eyes. It's just like the sunglasses. The glass actually affects the amount of natural light that gets to you. So we all need 20 minutes of natural light. And that's why in Scandinavia, they sit under light lamps in their conservatory in the morning while they're having breakfast, because when they have the season where they have very little daylight, they try and get it in other methods, because they know it leads to seasonal affective disorder or depression for people. So to getting out in the morning, because there is more lux factor in the morning, is really important. But how can you do that as a business? Can you have a morning meeting outside? Is there a place outside, a nice garden area that can encourage people to go to? Can you encourage people to get away from their desk because they need the light, not just because it's mentally health-wise good to take a break, but actually it's physically useful as well on top of it? Then we might want to think about what nutrition you've got in the office, especially if you've got night workers or people that work later. What is in that vending machine that's useful to somebody to make sure they've got the right nutrients in their body? Have you thought about the type of coffee you've got in the kitchen? You might want coffee with caffeine in the office in the morning, but you'll also want some decaffeinated ones, because the half-life of coffee means that it stays in the body in the afternoon and into the evening. But you might want a pick-me-up in the morning. And when I do longer talks, I'll talk a bit about the two systems of sleep, the sleep pressure and our circadian rhythms, and how coffee has an influence on that, as well as melatonin, the light coming in through the eyes. It's complicated, but I like to talk about it like the loo, like the system. So I'll make it really simple if people want to know more. But it is important that you think that you've got some nutrients in your body that will help with sleep, because our body needs certain microbiomes and certain chemicals in it to be able to work at its optimum. You might want to set up some napping stations. For those that are working on a project, working late, you might want to think about setting up stations where they can actually catch up on a quick 20-minute nap. Or for those teams that are really embracing the idea of napping, you might want to go for a 90, but you don't want to do anything in between. So when we talk about night shift workers, we do not let doctors and people making really important decisions have a 30 to 40-minute nap, because you will wake up really, really groggy and make more mistakes. We'll actually give them a coffee before they have their nap if they're going to go for a 90-minute one. So the police are well and truly ahead of the NHS. Seems stupid, doesn't it, around making sure that they're night shift workers. But again, I could do a whole day on night shift working and what's important.
Yeah, absolutely, Jill. And I feel mean having to stop you mid-flow, because this is the point, isn't it? So what I took from what you said there is, first of all, number one, it's everybody's issue. Really, in the workplace, we should all be looking out for each other, but definitely if you're in a management or a leadership role, it is your duty of care legally to make sure that that's happening. But I also heard things like awareness days can be really helpful if there are mental health first aiders or wellbeing practitioners, occupational health, if those things aren't being provided, if they should be, and if they are we talking about the topic of sleep? And of course there's Jill. You know, Jill would be amazing to bring into your organisation. But
and also you have to be careful that there's lots of misinformation out there, so it's really important you do link to somebody that's got sleep knowledge, because that is lots of information that means some real important sleep problems are not being addressed by people assuming things that don't have the knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. So could I just bring to people's awareness, thank you so much, Jill. I mean, we probably need night and day to talk to you about all of this, don't we? But yes, it is everybody's responsibility, including those individuals. So what we've done, we've tried to add some value here. Jill has very, very kindly, if you take a look in the chat, we've actually put some things in here. So what we've got is NHS Choices Start. Very briefly, Jill, what is the Start website under the NHS? What does that tell people about?
So it just tells you about lots of different other health issues, but there's a massive amount on sleep because the NHS is realising how much it's costing. We know that in GP practices, fatigue is one of the things that people go to the GP for, and it is increasing. We now have 15 million appointments just to talk about fatigue in GP practices. So it's an NHS site that just gives some really good basic advice. I always say, you know, if you've got a health problem, don't go on the website, go to the NHS site, because it will be researched and carefully thought through the advice that's on there. But it's only a starting point. You know, if you have got a real problem, go and get some real help from a real person rather than trying to do it on your own. If the first point of trying it alone doesn't work, don't give up.
No, absolutely. And so we've got some other things here for you. We've got a YouTuber video from Matthew Walker, Sleep Talk. We've got a book there about Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. We've got another book by Michael Mosley. There's a couple of things you might want to take a look at afterwards, which is the Epworth Sleepiness Scale questionnaire. We put that in here for you. That's from that's to do with asthma and lung, but actually it's a scale. You can see where you're at. And obviously the Stop Bang. And I'm just reading off my notes because Stop Bang stands for snoring, tired, overweight. There's something about breathing, age, blood pressure, breathing, age, neck and gender. So why not take a look and up your knowledge on that as well. So thank you so much for your insights so far, Jill. I'm actually going to now hand over to our brilliant colleague Andrew, who's been monitoring the chat and he's got loads of Q&As in there. So thank you, Andrew. Over to you to lead the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, and what a fantastic session that was, and it's so timely. I was saying to my co-host before this, I've been laughing to myself off camera throughout this because I had about half an hour's sleep last night, so it's very timely for me to this, and it's been hugely helpful. So I'll be going through the Q&A, and I think that there are. I'm going to try and split it down. There's obviously a lot of stuff that we've already covered, so some of it I think will be going back over some of those key points. And Jill, I think it would just be interesting to, I guess, you know, your absolute top tips for those. And I think I'm going to split it down into falling asleep, staying asleep, and then post-sleep. There's a little bit of that. And then there's also some specific questions for specific conditions, I guess, as well. So I guess if we take a step back and we start with the issue of falling asleep. So we've got someone here that said their issue is falling asleep. How do they tackle that issue? They recently quit coffee. It's made some difference, but it's not made all the difference. I was listening to you earlier. You were talking about, I guess, you know, the first yawn. I found that really interesting. So I guess what would be your top tip for success?
Yeah, that first yawn is a really, really important one. In fact, I've got a nice little, let me grab it, diagram that might help people understand that wave that I was talking about. So this is the, can I point to it? This is the dip. So you go from being really alert up here to having a dip, and we're constantly throughout the day going through that. So definitely working out the yawn effect is really important. But actually, if all you're doing is having a problem falling asleep and not staying asleep, it might be a very different problem. It might not be just about the fact that you're worried about things, that you're preoccupied. It might be that you've got a very specific problem, and falling asleep is part, it is an indication that you might have a problem with melatonin. So you might want to go to a sleep clinic. If that is the only problem you've got with sleep, you might need to have that extra input. And in the sleep service I work for, we might even do a night study. We might bring you in, or we might send you home with some equipment to check it out. But the first stage might be thinking about, if it's just falling asleep, maybe the coffee is a really good thing. Avoiding alcohol, because people think it helps them fall asleep, but it's not a proper sleep. So your body doesn't get into a nice routine. You don't begin to trust your body, you begin to trust the alcohol, and that's not helpful at all. You need to think about how much sleep you're getting. You might want to reduce the amount of sleep you're getting to see if that helps you fall asleep. But one of the greatest things is to do what I'd want you all to do naturally, is just to get out and get some natural sunlight. Even on a cloudy day, you know, today at home here, it's a little bit cloudy, but you'll still be getting a good amount of lux in through your eyes. You can get melatonin other ways. So there's a substance called spirulina that I often, when I do training and awareness groups, I like to take lots of products with me to make it a bit more interactive. So I actually give everybody a little shot of spirulina, a bit like you can go to the supermarket and get shots for ginger and turmeric. You can make up your own little shots for spirulina, and it's really high concentration of melatonin, but you don't need to pay for it. You can get it free by going outside. In some countries you can buy melatonin, but melatonin is only good for helping you fall off to sleep. It doesn't help you maintain sleep.
Okay, that's perfect.
Is a different chemical. So yeah, really knowing that it is just falling off to sleep.
Awesome. So very much hearing melatonin, that's awesome. So we're then getting into, I guess we've got a couple of specific questions here, Jill, around staying asleep, which is, I guess, the next bit that you're coming on to, right? So we've got I guess, a general question around, my issue isn't going to sleep, it's staying asleep. We've then got someone here as well who's saying, I'm really struggling to switch off. I try to keep a notepad next to my bed to take notes, but I start waking up between 3 and 4 a.m. There's a mixture of, it could be menopausal in there as well. And then I just I come out, have my day, and then at 4 or 5 p.m. I'm exhausted. So I guess tips for staying asleep.
And the first tip is that we actually all wake up. We all wake up at least one time in the night, usually after each 90-minute cycle of sleep. So the cycle of 90 minutes happens at night as well during the day. Different things happen during the night that we need sleep for, and I would explain that if we had more time. But actually, we wake at least once. It's so short for most of us, though, that we don't even know it. But if we put the electrodes on people's heads, we see it happening. And as we get older, that wakeful moments for those few seconds activates our bladder. So we might actually get out of bed, which means we're making our bodies more active. So our brain might think, oh, is it time to wake up? It also might mean that there's a lot more noise that you will suddenly hear. So you stay awake. So you start to become alert. So it might be that the person needs to think about what kind of things they can do to calm their body. So quite often when we're working through people with insomnia, is we actually run one segment of the course is around mindfulness. So I don't know what you've done on the other mental health webinars, but mindfulness is a huge element of cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, and it is ideal for calming the mind down. So I often describe mindfulness as being the thing that makes us stop being a puppy racing all over the place trying to do everything, and we're more like a dog, you know, that does things instinctively still, but with purpose, and rather than being led by fleeting thoughts. You've actually got self-control over the thoughts. We aren't what our thoughts are. We have a self-awareness below that. And mindfulness, there's tons of information I'd need to give to you around mindfulness, but actually knowing how to calm your mind so that when you do have that wakeful moment, you don't go accelerating it. The other thing, and the most important advice we'd often give in cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, is we'd ask people to actually get out of bed. Now, that's not instinctively suggested in the UK, but if you've been in bed and you've been frustrated for about 15 minutes, I don't want anybody clock watching. Like I talked before, I want those off and away somewhere else. But if your body is beginning to get irritated by the fact you can't get back to sleep, then get out of bed. And if it's happened for a few nights, set yourself up a little station where you can do something relaxing. I don't want you going off looking at your emails. I don't want you going off thinking, oh, I'll do a little bit of exercise, get my gym in while I'm awake. I want you to do something that's relaxing and it's going to calm your mind down again. So some people do some amazing art stuff that they wouldn't do otherwise. But again, because we're thinking about this lovely curve, we only want you to do it for 20 minutes. So although I tell you not to look at your clocks at any other time, when you get out of bed, I want you to set an alarm for 20 minutes, because all you need, because you've been awake for 15 minutes, another 20 minutes, another 10 minutes in bed, and you'll be hitting that next dip. So it is the best bit of advice that we give in cognitive behavior therapy, is to make sure you get out of bed. If this is becoming a recurring thing, then get out of bed and do something, but make sure it's in a nice set up place, because we don't want you whisking around trying to get blankets and working out where you're going to sit. Even students I've worked with, we think about how to make a station in their tiny bedrooms on the floor with some nice cushions and a nice blanket underneath, reading a book, doing a crossword, doing a puzzle. Some people love knitting, you know, just scribbling in an art book, all of those things. That means that the mind is becoming calmer to enable the next dip to happen.
That's awesome. And that's really helpful as well, because someone else had asked a question around, or I guess commented on lockdown and, you know, changing working patterns, and they were maybe working less during the day, but they were really struggling to switch off. And I certainly found that. I think I kind of, you know, wake up in the middle of the night with mind just completely racing. And so actually that's really useful advice about how to, I guess, you know, how to calm down so that you're not just on all the time.
And you know what, Andrew, that's a really good point, because of lockdown and because of more people working from home and the students that I said before, making a bedroom just for bed and for sleep and sex, but nothing else, is really, really important. So you need to clear out all that stuff. So I often say to students, use your drawers, stick stuff in the drawers, use a box on your desk, put things in the box, and have a spread on the bed that makes it look like it's a couch during the day with some nice cushions. And then at night time, you take the cushions off and you take that throw off, and it's a bed. So you're actually telling your brain it's a bed. You're tricking it into thinking it's a different room. But also you're creating a routine so that your mind goes on autopilot. Oh, this is the thing we do just before we sleep. So it will help train your brain to be on autopilot for, I don't need to think about sleep. It's going to happen naturally because this is what I do.
Okay, that's really helpful. So then, okay, so we discussed getting to sleep. We discussed a little bit of I can't sleep, or I'm struggling waking up. So then there are quite a few questions that have come in about, I guess, post-sleep. So one of the first ones that came in was, or one of the comments in the chat actually was, I feel like I sleep enough, but I still wake up feeling fatigued. What's going on?
Yeah, that is a different problem. That isn't necessarily a sleep problem. You definitely need to go and see your GP, because if you're getting enough sleep that would normally make you feel rested, but it's no longer making you feel rested, then you might need to go and see your GP. Like I said before, it could be a vitamin D deficiency, and that can take 6 months to recover from. It could be an iron problem, or it could be a specific sleep problem that we talk about called narcolepsy, or hypersomnia. And a bit like CBT for insomnia, we also have a CBT course for people with hypersomnia. It's a different program, but again, it's very useful, but it's not great to do it on your own. It's good to do it with other people where you can. So we often do groups, but if you don't like groups, then we can do it on a one-to-one basis. But any of those situations, it is really good to check it out. And that resource that Amantha shared before, that sleepiness one, is a great one. There are 6 really, really short questions, and it's dead easy to score. And if you score high, then you really need to be taking that score to your GP saying, don't fob me off. This is a high score. I need some support with this. I need to do some blood tests so we can see what's going on internally in my body.
Okay, that's really helpful. So then I guess also staying in this kind of like post-sleep cycle, 2 completely opposite end of the spectrum, but I guess, well, in my head, fairly related questions. So there's a question around, can you get too much sleep? And then there's also a question around, I guess, okay, so I've lost some sleep. I know I'm already there, right? I've lost sleep. Can you make up for having lost that sleep? And then they reference, I think this is known as sleep debt.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll answer the second one first, if that's all right. So it's a great question. And I think that many people think they can pay it back at the weekend. So they deprive themselves all week. They're busy working, they're going to the gym, they're just working long hours, or they've got lots of other commitments after work. And then they can't sleep at night. And they think, oh, actually, at the weekend, I'll catch up. And you can catch up, is the good news, but you can't catch up on the whole week. You can only catch up on that debt for 2 days. So I will often say to people, look, if you've got a busy project, and actually if you have a sleep debt and it's only short term because of a project or a piece of something that's happening, you know, maybe your mum's not well and you're having to go and sort stuff out for her, then that's not a big deal. It's when sleep deprivation goes on for a long length of time that it really begins to have the health impacts that affects your heart, your cardiovascular, your hormones, your immunity. So you really want to make sure that you bottom it as much as you can. Sorry, I've gone off track there completely.
No,
But you can't. So what I'll often say to people is, on a Wednesday, you might go, I'm not going to do a zillion things. I'm going to make sure on a Wednesday I catch up, because I'm not going to get that debt later on. So if your life is constantly in sleep debt, then make sure at least twice in the week you've got a moment when you're catching up and you're paying back into that piggy bank of sleep. Is really, really important. But it's a clever, quick win. So we often work with people. So Nick Littlehales works with lots of sports people that are often in sleep debt. You know, the British rowing team he works with. So they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and some of them are owls, so they don't want to do that. So actually he teaches people how to nap so it can improve their performance. And did the British rowing team do well? They did extremely well. So you might need to think about not just catching up on a Wednesday as well as at the weekend, but putting in some naps so that you get the benefit from it. But remember, be careful with naps. If you don't need it, don't take it, and try not to do it too close to when you go to sleep, because you'll be getting rid of a thing called sleep pressure. So that you need pressure to build, you need to be awake long enough for you to go to sleep. Yeah, so if you take your nap at 6, 7 o'clock at night and you're going to go to sleep at 9, you're very unlikely to get it. And the other thing great about naps is if you can make them routine based. So again, your brain just goes, oh, I've just made up my couch to sleep on, and now I'm going to do a nap, and it becomes routine, then you're more likely to benefit from it. Sometimes people, the rowing team particularly, some of them within that team took 6 months before a nap actually became a nap. For 6 months, they were just doing the routine and resting their body, which is just good. But actually, it took longer for their brain to go, oh, okay, I'm going to do this now because I'm constantly sat here. I might as well take it. So, yeah, you can pay back a sleep debt, but very, very specifically, which other cultures have been doing for a long time. My nana was Spanish, so I was taught how to have a siesta quite early on. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I got into sleep work. But the other question was, can you have too much sleep?
Yeah, exactly.
Having too much sleep, again, is a problem, especially if you're still feeling fatigued. But everybody's different. So my brother-in-law, he's got learning disabilities, and he needs 10 hours sleep on average to feel wakeful. And that's probably because the world is far more complicated for him. It's taken a lot of his energy and ability. So he needs more sleep. So sleep and the different stages have different functions. So you might need more sleep at certain times. So, but if you're excessively sleeping and you're still tired, then yeah, like that other question, you need to go and see your GP. Anything. So people often say, I'm obsessed with getting 8 hours sleep. We are all different. I am short. I'm only 5 foot. I would love to be taller, but hey, I live with it. And it's the same for sleep. If you're only a 6-hour sleeper, lots of people go, I can get more done. But if you're a long time sleeper, 9 hours, anywhere between 6 and 9, as long as you're feeling rested, don't worry about it. But if you're going beyond 9 hours, that's when you'd be saying, is that too much sleep? And that's when perhaps I'd be saying, we need to go and have some assessments done to check this out a little bit more. Because it's hard to know what is too much.
Yeah, no, totally. And no, I guess we're coming to the end of time now. I think there are some questions that we'll need to take away and we'll address offline. I guess there was one that came up in a couple of themes that would be really helpful to just get a quick response to, if that's possible. And it was around nutrition and supplements. And is there anything that people should be thinking about that would be helpful?
So that spirulina I talked about before is a great one. I'm just looking away for a minute because I have another substance. So of all the supplements, loads of research has been done. Jasmine, lavender, they have a very, very tiny effect, almost placebo, but better than other substances. So if you want to do something, it's slightly helpful, but not great. The only supplement that's been found to have a better effect than all the others is a substance called valerian. Okay, still not great. We still think doing all the sleep hygiene is the most important things. And I could talk loads more about that sleep hygiene. Try and remember those 4 elements. And it's not just about what you do at night, it's what you do during the day. I'd explain it in more detail, which are much, much better than any sleep supplements that you can get or any sprays that you can get. But if you are anxious about it, knowing that you're doing everything possible to support yourself, self-care is really, really vital. So if you want to take some supplements, you want to have some nice sprays, because to feel more relaxed, less stressed at night, our nose is very, very important. So if we can make a calming environment smell-wise, it can make a difference. So I actually, although I say don't use any supplements, and I haven't got it with me, it's by the side of my bed, is I have a little bag of lavender. And I know the left nostril is a calmer one when you're breathing. So I'll close my right nostril and have a little smell of the lavender, and I'll put it back by the side of my bed. I'm sure it's placebo effect to the vast degree, but I'm actually giving myself 2 messages. 1, it's time to relax, and 2, it's time to breathe better. So I know that I snore at night, and I've been practicing breathing only through my mouth. So one of my great phrases that I would love to be out there, rather than you snooze, you lose, is you should breathe through your mouth as much as you eat through your nose.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you. And I know we're at time there, so I'm going to hand back over to David in a minute, I believe, just to close us out. There are, I think, 5 definitely unanswered questions, which we'll take away and make sure are addressed. And so, look, it was amazing listening to you. Thank you. And there's so many little tips and tricks in there that I'm sure everyone will take something away from this. So thank you so much for doing that. Amantha, David, can't remember which one of you I'm handing back over to, but it's one of you. So I'll hand back over to whoever it is.
Handing back to David for closing. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jill, Amantha, Lisa and Andrew. Brilliant session. I found it really, really informative. And Jill, especially, thank you for your generosity. We will share your details with the attendees in the post-webinar follow-up. We've already had some people say, how do we connect with you, for them to take advantage of the free 15-minute session, which is wonderful. It just remains for me to say thank you, audience, for listening and for contributing so well. If you would like any more information on how to get involved in our mental wellbeing community, or indeed any information on how to get involved with the Chamber, please contact me and I'll be happy to steer you in the right direction. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day and have a great night's sleep.
Oh, perfect.
See ya.